Hey, it's Mark Lanier with your video thought for the day. So today I'm coming to you from Portland, Oregon. I'm on the road. I'm in my hotel room, hence the scenery behind me. And I've been reading on this trip something that's very important and relevant to my thoughts for the day this week. My thoughts for the day this week are basically, okay, we've had Easter. What does the implications of the Easter event mean for us the rest of our lives, or certainly the week after Easter? And so on this trip, I've been reading a book by a fellow. I've read some of his stuff before, but this guy's name is John Gray. This book is entitled 7 Types of Atheism. Now, John Gray is a British professor. I think he's retired now, a philosophy guy. And he is very interesting because he himself is an atheist. So this is not a Christian writing about atheists. This is an atheist writing about 7 different types of atheism. And in one of the chapters, he takes to task those who are atheists because they believe that science is the be-all and end-all, and science disproves religion. He says that's not a type of atheist. He is certainly not one that he thinks passes intellectual rigor. But in the process of reading about that type of atheist, I want to read you something that he said that I think is very insightful. He says that the debate between science and religion is best forgotten. A more serious challenge to Christianity comes from history. Now listen to this. If Jesus was not crucified and did not return from the dead, the Christian religion is seriously compromised. Well, I would go a step further. I would say if Jesus was not really crucified, Jesus was not really resurrected, the Christian religion is fake, fraud, phony, and it's not that it's seriously compromised. It is totally compromised. It is totally shot. Paul says the same thing. Paul, in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, said something that is incredibly profound. Now, understand that the writings of Paul, certainly the Corinthian letter and the Galatian letter, which are 2 letters where he goes into great detail about his encounter with the resurrected Jesus. Nobody disputes whether or not Paul wrote those letters. Nobody disputes whether or not Paul was a real historical figure. Nobody disputes that Paul would have been writing these letters within 20 years or so of the death and resurrection of Jesus. And so you've got here a person who was a skeptic, who was a cynic, who was a zealot against the idea of a resurrected Jesus, who does an entire 180. And he doesn't do it for financial gain. In fact, he loses money out of this. He loses family. He loses prestige. He loses fame. He endures hardship, suffering. It's a bizarre story for someone who is making a mistake. But this same Paul writes to the Corinthians in a letter we call 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And he says that the good news is, of course, that Christ died for our sins, was buried, was resurrected on the 3rd day in accordance with the scriptures, and Paul says was seen by, and he starts listing people and people and people and hundreds of people at one time, and most of them are still alive, and you can go check this out, and it's very authoritative listing. But then he says, if Christ was not resurrected, we being Christians, are to be pitied among all people, because we've staked our lives, we've staked our present as well as our future on this truth, this bedrock fundamental truth that John Gray writes about, that it's a historical fact that Jesus was crucified and resurrected. Paul says, if that's not true, We should all just eat, drink, and be merry. Life has no meaning. It's ephemeral. Enjoy what you can out of the day because your days are numbered, and then you're done. You're toast. You're ended. But if indeed Christ was crucified, and if indeed Christ was resurrected, then you put on glasses that give vision to a whole new understanding of life. Now there is meaning. There is purpose. There is something to be sought after that is valuable. There's honor and dignity. Love has meaning beyond simply being a chemical reaction in the brain. There's good we can strive for. There's way we can show God's love and concern for others. The resurrected Jesus has meaning for me, not simply because it sustains my faith, a la John Gray, but because it gives meaning to my life. I want to show that by the way I treat people. I want to show that by the way I live within myself today and every day. And that's your video thought for the day. I'll see you tomorrow.